Okay,
Jeez,
go.
Jonathan.
Well, today here is our second clay spots of the year, and with us today we have Kim Davey. Kim is the head of the ceramic department at H.B. Beal Secondary School in downtown London, the premier art school in Canada, secondary art school in Canada, at which it has a position that it's held for over 100 years. It has been the school where the likes of Patterson Ewan, Greg Curnow, Jamili Hassan, just an entire roster of extraordinary Canadian artists have gone through the halls of Beal. And actually, Kim Davey herself is a graduate of Beal and is now working there as the head of the ceramic department, but with also a checkered and dramatic's the wrong word, a very strong clay background. And here we have Kim.
Welcome. You for having me.
My pleasure, as always. You know, I was thinking about this interview, and what's interesting is that, you know, for the past 18 years, the gallery has been showing the leading ceramic artists in Canada, and some of them, unfortunately, are no longer with us. But the history of clay in Canada is not a particularly long one at the studio art level. And what's fascinating is that you started your clay career at Beal, am I correct?
Yes.
And was it there that you decided to go into clay full time?
Yes.
And then off to NASCAD, where you worked with one of the greatest ceramic artists in the country, Walter Ostrom.
Yes.
What was that like?
Amazing. I loved working with Walter. He was very challenging and also incredibly inspiring. So his enthusiasm about pots and making pots really indoctrinated this feeling of proud potters. You know, if you're making pots, you needed to understand the historical context and you needed to take responsibility for what you were making, but also there was a tremendous push for, exploration, experimentation, but holding in the grounds of craftsmanship. If anyone who's ever seen Walter speak knows that he has this infectious enthusiasm about his passion for clay, and that becomes kind of the whole experience within the department. So he's notorious for being challenging and difficult in terms of how he pushes his students and what he expects of them, but it certainly raises the bar, and it really supported and I think nurtured in me a true passion and a pride in terms of what I did. So,
well, I know that one thing it is certainly, I think that his teaching style, you obviously have been influenced by it because
tremendously.
Your students are in here all the time. And I think that you've been, how long now have you been?
So this is the beginning of my 9th year working in the Beal Art department.
Okay, so 50% of the galleries, we've been here 18 years. So we have worked with you for 9 years, and watching the students come in, whereas we always had the classes come in, the enthusiasm of the classes coming in now, and the number of students who have gone on to study clay professionally is really quite remarkable.
It is really remarkable. I think I was trying to think about how many students I'd sent on who made the decision to study post-secondary ceramics specifically. And, you know, right now we're hitting about a dozen or beyond, like 12 to 15 students. And that's in the 9 years that I've been there.
Well, and also the schools, they've gone to
Amazing.
ACAD, they've gone to OCAD, they've gone to Sheridan, they've gone to
NASCAD,
Emily Carr, Parsons.
Yep.
Actually, there's also one at the Chicago Art Institute.
Yep.
So it's been really quite fascinating. It's also been fascinating because not only have you got the kids enthusiastic about what they're doing, you've also worked with us in when artists are here having artist talks for the students. What kind of impact do you find having the artists speak directly to the kids makes?
I think, well, it has a tremendous impact, and we're so lucky that we can access your gallery. So, I mean, in such a diverse way, we can come and visit, and you'll speak to the kids about what you offer. And then when artists are visiting and having an exhibition, often the students will come and they'll get private interview, essentially, or artist talk with these individuals, which kind of makes it real for them. They're able to connect, ask really important questions about process, and also realize that they're human beings and very accessible. That's the one thing I love about what you do with the students. It's not unusual for you to say, oh, you love this artist, Mira Matheson, let me put you on the phone with the artist. And the kids freak out and they get nervous, as I would have at that age and as I still do if I admire someone. But then it kind of demystifies the whole artist as other, I think, in a way, that experience. And it allows them to feel like it's a legitimate opportunity for them. Like, I can pursue this and I can gain access to more information. It also instills, there's something to be said about a student having the opportunity to access real ceramic objects, like not on a slide, not in a book, actual physical ceramic art in their hands. And that experience just enhances the quality of the education that they're getting. So they know where the bar lies, they know that it's something that takes time. And so it just it really rounds out the educational experience for the students, and we're so lucky to have the relationship that we do.
But moving on to, of course, with the students being able to connect with artists, talk with artists,
Mm-hmm.
discuss, work with artists, because the reality is that who you study under influences your own work, influences everywhere. Like, for example, when I look at your mugs, I see a Joan Bruneau influence.
Absolutely, yeah.
The glazes, the amorphous quality of the actual figures, it's pretty cool. And then, of course, you've also been, you take a lot of workshops. Like,
yes.
These little bowls that we have here, which for anybody thinking that they're just simple little bowls, explain how complex this way. Because this was with the workshop with Linda Sornham.
Yeah, Linda Sorman, yes. We did a 9-month residency through Fusion, the Ontario Clay and Glass Association. And the challenge was to make work outside of yourself. So something that was not indicative to your already existing repertoire. And so I'm a romantic. I love landscape, and I love the connection between clay and earth and glazes and where it comes from, but also the environment. So these became little hand-built landscapes, if you will, little experiences that were kind of, on the cusp of, ugly, but also beautiful. And so the additive components was a challenge that I set for myself, just to use the refuse. So these are actually components that come from scraping the interior of the bowl to create the form, because I was making the form on molds. Traditionally, I'm a thrower and a potter, and I've always loved cut and paste, and obviously was very influenced by Joan, and still keep in touch with her. She's an incredible potter. So I decided...
Ceramic warrior, I believe.
She is a ceramic warrior. Yes.
I never forgot that when I first opened up the gallery, Joan Bruneau and the ceramic warrior.
Absolutely.
But Linda Sornham, who's now at Alfred University, but who's the head of the ceramic department at Sheridan, her work is also very challenging, very definitely outside the box.
Yes.
And Walter Ostrom really is the, when we think of the West Coast, there's a tendency to think primarily of, say, Robin Hopper. Mm-hmm. When you think of the East Coast, there is, you can't think of the East Coast in NASCAD without thinking of Walter Ostrom.
No, it's impossible.
And also his, the refined nature of his work. And all of that, what do you, in transmitting their idea, not their ideas, but utilizing their ideas into your work. Mm-hmm. How
does that translate?
Yeah.
Well, I think, when you put it that way, I think that it's and then you know, having talked about Joan and referring to Ceramic Warrior, that's something that somehow is obviously connected to NASCAD and Walter as well. And so courage comes to mind. Just having the courage to be willing to try new things and throw a beautifully volumetric, breathy, symmetrical pot on the wheel and then cut it up and put it back together. And so it's about being willing to take risks and seeing where it takes you and accepting, right, the success or the failure on the journey. I really feel like that's like a big part of it, but also taking responsibility for the level of craftsmanship and, you know, what you imbue into the body of work.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to Ceramic Warrior, I mean, there's certainly your time at Beal. You have fought for the kids, you've fought for the program, and now you're fighting off the number of kids because the attempted enrollment in ceramics has gone through the roof.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, so now, you know, you're actually, from what I understand, occasionally having to turn people away.
Yes.
Which is, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that in here we see the fruits of your labor, but also with your warrior work in ceramic education, that cuts into your ability to produce.
Yes. Yes.
Does that, do you ever, because I mean, we were putting
100%
together a display of work for this interview and thought, okay, we don't really have a lot of work.
Yeah.
But, I mean, over 9 years, do you ever get frustrated with that?
So it's hard to explain kind of the beast that is Beal Art and all that goes on within it. And so I would say, you know, I look at potters and instructors, someone like Bruce Cochran, for example, how he does what he does. He's amazing. Like the fact that he's been able to develop and consistently make work and influence a whole generation of potters and ceramic artists. And for me, I mean, there's a lot of social, emotional work that I do with the kids, and so sometimes it takes a toll and I need to rest. It's a battle and a struggle that I'm trying to figure out. I'm also a deadline-driven person, as you've probably come to realize.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, even when I went back to Lunenburg last summer and studied with Walter to reconnect, he acknowledged that that's part of who I am as well. So it's about me understanding, you know, now that because this will be the 10th year that I'm working as a teacher in a public school board. And so that's a good, I really feel like I understand what I'm doing in that context of my life now. So it's easier for me to start bridging out and committing to what I do in the studio. I long for it and I miss it. I feel like so much of my creative energy goes into what I do with the students, you know?
But at the same time, you recently did a workshop with Angela DePetta.
Yes, that was amazing.
And that would be, I mean, again, one of the country's ceramic greats. Yeah. So you have connected with so many of the really major ceramic artists. Mm-hmm. But do you also, I mean, as somebody who is, you mentioned Bruce Cochran, we've mentioned Walter Ostrom, Angela DePetta. These people are working with students in a college or university setting. Mm-hmm. You're working with them in a high school setting.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you've got them at a much more formative stage than the others do. Do you think that possibly that's part of the drain, because you're spending so much energy getting them interesting or maintaining their interest and getting evolving them into being self-directive, which by the time they get to university, they're expected to do that themselves.
Right, I do think there's an element to that. Also, our school year is longer, so when we do access a break in the summer, it's a 2-month break rather than being done at the end or beginning, middle of May. But yeah, I think that formative stage, there's a lot of figuring out who I am and what I'm doing and why. And our whole mission in the Beal Art program is like to connect the kids with that answer. You know, do I want to pursue art as a career? What does that look like? You know, in what facet do I want to be a cultural producer? Maybe I don't want to be an artist, but I might want to be a gallerist or a curator. or maybe I go into the trades. And so trying to access that within them can be challenging. And then, connecting them to the possibilities of everything is also good. And I think the true story is that we're in an age where the kids are, I love the kids, and I love investing in working with them and supporting them and guiding them. And so, and I also think that's why I became a teacher, because I think there is a difference for sure, the age and stage difference that you're referencing, yes.
Do you also find, this is just a view from the sidelines, but it seems that each class there is a move away from the wheel and getting much more into the abstract, the hand-built, the things that are totally different from what I would imagine when you were going to Beal and taking ceramics. There's just, whereas form is still important, it doesn't seem to, it's not just about making a bowl anymore.
Right. It can be, but
there's a separation. It's no longer like a hobbyist course, or kids thinking that they can, I'm going to take this because this is like taking basket weaving.
Right.
No offense to the basket weavers out there, but the reality is that we always make jokes about going to college, and then there are the courses that you sort of are the definite passes, and you have evolved this course to the point that it's no longer a definite path. You've got to get in there and you really have to work. And I see the kids and the evolution of what they do over the course of a year.
Yes. Which is, it's so fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, it's extraordinary. And their interest with glazes and, the enthusiasm when they come in here and being able to handle work that if they were in a museum, they'd only be able to see behind glass.
Exactly.
And to have the telephone handed to them. Say, well, here's Mira Matheson, or here's any of the artists that we show, that they get to ask questions.
Yeah.
But you really have also encouraged and nurtured that. Do you ever find that some of them come in with the enthusiasm of a hobbyist and realize that it's a lot more work than they expected?
I think that's consistent across the board. Because part of the reason they connect with art is because it's cathartic in some way, or it's where they found themselves and how they connect with the world. And so that's a wonderful experience to have. But when you flip that and understand that if you're going to make it a career, that it's much more complex, right? There's the entrepreneurial side and communication and connecting, and then the commitment to work and work ethic. That's a big deal. And I feel like a lot of my philosophies that reside there very much align with how I was instructed by Walter, and that influence. So I hear him in my head quite often as the true story, and I push the kids in a similar way as I was pushed. And even though sometimes that was a scary experience for me at university, it was exactly what I needed. So my philosophy is push them in a caring way, but also make them understand that this isn't about doing something on the side for yourself. This is about nurturing a career potentially and understanding what that entails. So I always say to the kids when we have a critique, you need to be ready, you need to be prepared, and when I walk in the classroom, we're going to begin. That's the expectation. That's what a professional would do. You're going to show up on time, right? You're going to be prepared and ready. And so there's an element of that slowly we have to nurture. Not everybody makes that deadline, or they don't show up prepared. But I have that expectation of them. And I think that helps support them in understanding, what do I need to do, to be professional, but also just to be accountable to my own reputation,
But and also, to that end, over the past few years, you've evolved a really strong portfolio program.
Yes.
Which is quite unique. Unique. It is the first one in London.
Yeah.
And it's at a secondary school level.
Yeah.
And you did it, and people are trying to emulate and follow what you did. So in the role of ceramic warrior, you've certainly taken a page out of Joan Bruneau's book.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I find that really exciting. I know that the enthusiasm of the kids that are coming in is quite interesting. And then also, I think there's a change too in what the classes are like now. I mean, high school today, from way back when I was a high school student, even to when you were a high school student, to today. I mean, now you've got binary, non-binary, gender fluid, and the acceptance that the school system, and Beal in particular, nurtures the originality of the individual student. So do you find that that comes out in their work as well?
I do, and we encourage it. It's part of, I think, the culture that we're proud of and the culture that we appreciate, especially in the art department and Beal in general. Our kids feel safe and they feel respected, and within that we also, you referred to before, not as many kids are making pots, and the work is maybe a little bit more complex or just a little bit different than what we would have seen from the past, and I think we're working hard as a staff to do that. I think, my philosophy has always been that if I'm instructing students and I give them an assignment, we like to call them explorations now, because it's ongoing, right? The idea that this leads to something else. So sometimes if you refer to it as a project, it has a definitive beginning and an end. And so we're trying to shift their perception and how art is produced, and also having them take responsibility in why, there's always an answer. They've never often, very few of them have been asked that question before. And I think as our curriculum has shifted and changed, that's been influenced by Portfolio Day and our relationships that we've built with post-secondary art institutions. So we always decompress and talk to the reps, and we try to access what they're looking for in incoming students, and also, most importantly, connect the right students with the right institutions and the right professors. They deserve it.
It's interesting when you say that you no longer call it projects, because projects have a concept, it's got a beginning and it's got an end. So by calling them explorations, there's an evolution.
Right.
We do the same thing here, in that when an artist has a piece here from, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were using the term, that's old work. And we said, no, you can't call it old work. There's nothing wrong with the work. It's not, it's not like stale bread. The reality is that it is historical work, and that if you really want to follow an artist's career and the evolution of an artist's oeuvre, then what you need to look at is work that has been done earlier and later. So I guess that we're running a parallel course here, and it's always interesting when we have conversations like that just as the evolution is taking place here, the evolution is also taking place in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I find that really exciting.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting to think of the synchronicity, I mean, we have a great department of teachers in Beal Art. We have an excellent department head in Jeff Heen. We have a good community, and we all have different philosophies, but we work hard to support the students in being prepared for post-secondary art, if they choose that pathway. And so it's a great opportunity. I think this year for Portfolio Day, we're going to be hosting 25 programs, so maybe 20 universities or colleges from across North America.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So the first Portfolio Day
was 6 years ago, so this year will be our 6th annual Portfolio Day.
Okay, so just as refresh for me, what inspired Portfolio Day?
So, I think when I became a teacher, I'd been working in the clay community for almost 10 years, and I participated in 2 international residencies, one at Watershed Center in Maine and one at the Harbourfront Center in Toronto, and I had a clear understanding of how to, and had been nurtured very well by Walter. I had the opportunity through Walter to work with Julie Galloway, and Joan, to curate a portfolio that was conducive to successful application. And one could denote
successful application to an institution.
Or a residency.
Or residency,
right.
Okay.
So, and having been successful in those processes and sitting on juries, when I arrived at Beal Art and started teaching there for years, there's a National Portfolio Association, and there is an annual event that occurs at OCAD University. This year it'll be at York, where institutions come from across North America, and kids line up to go. And it's on a Saturday afternoon. It runs 9 to 5, and they line up in Toronto and would go. And so my first couple of years, I realized that the week before Portfolio Day, our students were not going to class, were freaking out, were not really prepared, didn't know how to have a Portfolio Day, and were also traveling to Toronto. And here we were, this large art program within the city. You know, we boast sometimes 300 students and 300 senior students. And so I remember going for a walk with Jonathon, my colleague, and we had this big discussion, and I was like, we should just do our own. We should teach the kids how to do a portfolio, right? So we engaged them in learning how to write a CV, how to work on their artist statements for application, and also how to curate a body of work. How do I represent myself, and how do I gear it towards what that institution is asking for? So Jeff and I are good collaborators in that, you know, then he said, okay, well, if they're already coming to Ontario for National Portfolio Day, we should leverage that all the reps are being flown into this location and select a day the week prior so that the potential for them to be able to come to Beal is there. Because if they're flying into Toronto, they can rent a car. And also Etobicoke School for the Arts in Etobicoke, they run one on the Friday prior. So we just started it.
Which has resulted in you ending up in Hong Kong.
Yes, that was amazing. Yeah, I was invited to Hong Kong by the Savannah College of Art and Design.
Is Beal the only secondary school doing this?
Etobicoke School for the Arts is doing it as well, as far as I understand, to the degree. The way that they curate the day is different. So what the reps experience with the students is different at ESA, but they essentially, and I think sometimes have more colleges and universities participating, and I think that's locality and proximity, and also their head is amazing and gets a lot of people coming in. We really boast that our International Portfolio Day, the reps have one-on-one 20-minute interviews with our students where the students gain access to critical feedback about their work. So to have people in the arts community, professors, recruitment officers, etc., come in, sit down with the kids and be able to give them that critical feedback is amazing. It's a one-of-a-kind opportunity. And so some of the seniors will have 3 to 4 interviews during Portfolio Day.
And then also the reality is that the program that Jeff Heen is now the department head, and you're the Department of Ceramics. The evolution of the Beal program is such that often these kids, when they are accepted at the college or university level, they often jump ahead.
Yes, in some situations, yeah. So we have articulation agreement. We've had a long-standing articulation with NASCAD. In fact, when I went to NASCAD, I received advanced standing, is what they would call it. So that means that students, some of the institutions will account for the time that the students have spent kind of post-secondary at Beal Art, and then had the opportunity to kind of develop their skill in their portfolio. So they waive certain foundation classes for them at the university. So Jeff's worked really hard to get an articulation agreement with Fanshawe, so students can go right into second year Fanshawe, provided that their portfolio supports it. Sometimes the students are getting 3/4 of a year to a year waived at NASCAD, and also Alberta College of Art and Design has been providing us with articulation as well, waiving the first year, the introductory year. So, and often that is because the students who come to us post graduating from grade 12 spend foundation year with us, so that'd be grade 13, and then specialist year with us, which is grade 14. So they've spent a 2-year kind of nurturing their art practice and can take that with them. So it's a monetary gain for the kids and a really good opportunity.
You know, during this interview, quite different from the one that we did with Bernadette Pratt, where we primarily spoke about her work, her production, and here we've really concentrated more on your role as a ceramic educator. But one of the things that did come out also is that, being deadline driven and project driven, and how, you're really strong with the students about, here you've got to do. So I think at this point that I should mention as your gallerist that
it's time.
we need you to also start, because this is what we're down to.
Right.
So
right.
I think that we need to see more work. But on that, Kim,
Right.
thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and thank you coming in on a Saturday morning for this interview.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks.